Today we're talking about on-shelf availability, OSA, and our friend Mike Graen is back with us. He's got a great presentation that he's going to be sharing. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of everything, Mike, let's define a couple of terms. What is the difference between OSA, on-shelf availability, versus simply being in stock?
Yeah, the big difference. So there's been a lot of kind of emphasis over the course of the last several years of suppliers needing to fulfill obligations of on time and in full and other kind of supplier expectations. And that basically means when a retailer like Walmart orders it, they want you to deliver it when they want it, and they want to deliver it what they ask for, which is a pretty fair expectation. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. I think the new trend is assuming I'm taking care of my OTIF requirements and other supplier requirements, is my stuff actually making it to the shelf? Like, so you see this associate kind of stocking shelves. Is it actually making it there or not? And there's two ways to kind of distinguish that. In stock is basically measured, or the expectation is, if the product has an on hand larger than what I expect to sell. Example, I have 10 in the store. I expect to sell 5. I'm considered in stock. Okay?
Okay.
Now, there's two problems with that, Jared. Problem number one is just because it's in stock doesn't mean it's actually on the shelf for a customer to buy. It could be sitting in the back room, could be on top stock, could have been lost or damaged, could have an on hand that's incorrect, where I really don't have any, but it says I got some. All of those are not really good measurements that says in stock doesn't mean is it available for a customer to sell. On-shelf availability is sort of the measurement that we want to talk about, which is it actually available for a customer to purchase? Whether it's a customer who is going in to shop for themselves or somebody who has created an online order and they have a person at Walmart picking the items for them off the shelf. Either way, is it available for them to purchase or somebody to purchase? So that's a big difference between the way we look at it, which is in stock's nice to know, but your in stock could literally be 10 points higher than your on shelf availability. And really, suppliers are trying to focus right now is it on my shelf and can people buy it? Because that's, to me, just as important as the OTIF numbers.
Well, nowadays, when you're a Walmart supplier, you really do have on time, in full just hammered into your head. You've got to be on time, you've got to be in full, or else you're going to get penalized. And a lot of suppliers feel like their job's done at that point. You know, once you're not getting fines or once you're up there around 98%, you're doing fine as long as you're meeting on time in full. But that's really where the job starts, and you're not done until it's actually in the store. So as a Walmart supplier, why do I need to focus so hard on OSA?
Yeah, well, first off, I think it is important for them to focus on OTIF. I'm not trying to take anything away from that because you can't put it on the shelf if Walmart doesn't have it. So let's be clear, that is predominantly their responsibility to order the product when Walmart needs it so they can get it to their stores and get it on the shelves. However, at the end of the day, discussions at the Walmart home office will also always involve with, this item's just not selling very well, and so we're thinking about maybe taking some of these items away and trying something else with another supplier. And the time to have the discussion, but I haven't been on the shelf for the last 6 months in these. Well, I'm sorry, we should have worked on that before. So I believe it's fundamental that you have to be responsible for getting the product into Walmart's distribution center when they need it. However, I also feel like it's incumbent upon the suppliers to play a role, not all of the role, but at least collaborate and work effectively with Walmart to make sure their stuff makes it on the shelf.
Walmart has so many great tools, scorecards and ways in retail link to measure on time in full and SQEP. When it comes to OSA, how do you measure your OSA?
Oh, very good question. And it's not an easy one to answer. So let me show you a little bit about what it is. And Jared, I know that we've talked about this before, but if I look at this is a shelf of Head and Shoulders. I see a bunch of product on the shelf, and you probably see one major glaring issue, which is right down here on the third or fourth shelf. I have an out of stock, on shelf availability issue. That's what normally people will see. What they don't see is there's a bunch of other stuff behind that. The first thing is, in this yellow or gold color labels, that means the label is missing and the product is missing. So if I'm supposed to have item number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I have 1, 2, and 4, and number 3 is missing, the product is missing and the label is missing. It's not quite as obvious as the out-of-stock one, but it's still there. Secondly, I have pricing issues where the price at the register and the price at the point of sale and the shelf are different. That's an issue. The third one I want to talk through is plugged items. Plugged items basically means there's a label there, but the product that is above that label is the wrong product. So again, I've got a label. It's got a space for product, but the wrong product is there. It could have gotten missed, gotten a couple items shifted over or whatever. But the bottom line is that all of these boxes right here represent on-shelf availability issues. Now, obviously, question is, okay, well, that's great. That's great to understand. It's bigger than just out of stocks. How do you measure it? And I'm going to tell you, this is not just a Walmart thing, but there's basically 4 different ways that you can measure it. Number one, you do have to measure it. If you want to improve it, you have to measure it. One way to measure it is by using an algorithm. And so you're leveraging data that comes in and an algorithm that will literally show you how many items are selling. So if I'm selling a bunch and then it goes down to 0, I know that the most likely the product wasn't on the shelf. Secondly, the second example we have is audits. You can have an audit done by a third party, a preferred service provider, or several of the crowdsourcing kind of technologies out there that will allow you to be able to do store audits. Thirdly is some retailers are actually using robotic technology, so shelf scanning robots that will literally go through and show you when things are not on the shelf. And then lastly, and we've talked about this before, Jared, RFID technology, which is obviously something Walmart is very interested in expanding, will give them an indication of if it's on the shelf or not. But if you use one of these tools at the supplier's disposal, usually algorithms or audits are the primary way that they use to try and figure out if their products are actually on the shelf or not.
Mike, I know you're working every week with Walmart suppliers trying to resolve their OSA issues. As you're going through and looking at their whole process, what are some of the major causes of OSA issues?
There's several. But the first is to know if you have an issue. The causes of OSA are really 3. And I'm oversimplifying all of this, okay? But there are 3 big buckets. One is something that is problematic for retail forever, which is on-hand accuracy. And the second one is store operations, and the third one is supply chain. So let's talk store on-hand accuracy. So Jared, I've got these 4 items here. And what I've got is, what does the store have on hand? And when I say on hand, I mean, what does the system say they have? What's the numbers in retail link? Says I've got 4 of these. They actually have 4 of these. So that particular first item, that 32 by 32, is in fact accurate. Let's go down to the second to the last one, or let's just go down to the last one to just jump all the way down. The 30 by 30 jeans, it says I have 3. I actually have 0 in the store. And the reorder point is when it comes down to 2, replenish. Okay? So Jared, it says I have 3, but I don't have any. How many do I sell?
You sell none.
Right. More importantly, how many do I reorder?
Well, you're not gonna reorder it because the store on hand's reading 3. So is that throwing off the reorder point?
100%.
Yeah.
So it says I've got 3, and I'll reorder when it hits 2. It's never going to hit 2 because I don't have 2 there. Okay. This happens a lot, way too much. This is called ghost inventory or phantom inventory. And the reality is inventory accuracy in most retail environments are somewhere between 50 and 65%. And unfortunately, this happens way too often where it says you have inventory, but you really don't. Could be just a replenishment issue, or it could be somebody just ordered the product, so I go to pick it up off the shelf and they don't have it. And the system says I got 3. Well, I don't know where they are. Let me go see if I can find them. And of course, that never turns out really well. There is a correlation between inventory and accuracy. If you can get your inventory accurate, you are liable to be able to see anywhere between a 4 to 8% increase in sales just by getting the inventory accurate. Those are real dollars for both the retailers and the suppliers. So on-hand accuracy is the first issue. The second issue is what I'll call store operations. Labor's tough right now, getting people, hanging on to them. The process of delivering product into a store, getting it to the sales floor, getting it stocked in the right location. If it fits, great. If it doesn't, gets top stocked or brought back in the back. As Walmart doing all of the technology they need to be able to get the product out of the back room and get on the store shelf when it does fit. It just takes a lot of, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of items that Walmart has to take care of every single day. There may be times where they can't get to them all, okay? And so store operations plays a very, very critical role in making sure if it's in the building that it's on the shelf. And unfortunately, it's a challenge in a retail environment because you have all the suppliers there, you got the associates there, you got third-party service providers, and sometimes, unfortunately, they're sort of working against each other. But one of the things that we have seen is if you have an algorithm that's measuring on-shelf availability and you're cruising around, these are 2 items that are basically selling between 10 and 15 a day, and all of a sudden they drop to 0. Why would they drop to 0, Jared? Any idea?
That one throws me. Why would they just all of a sudden go down to 0? I'm going to lean on your expertise.
Yeah, they're going to go down to 0 because it's not available for sale anymore.
Yeah.
You don't sell 15 a day and all of a sudden go to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Something happened that made them no longer available. I don't think people just woke up one day and said, I'm just not buying these products anymore. So what we do is we measure these with algorithms, and then we leverage PSPs, the Preferred Service Provider Network. There's 5 of them. I'm not here to promote their business, but they do a great job of getting in stores and fixing these alerts. And what happens is if we can alert them, then we can actually measure this new metric called recovered sales, which is how much do I have? How much recovered sales do I have now because I got that product in stock? These are real measurements that you can measure to actually measure both on-shelf availability and your recovered sales. So that is the second major reason, which is just store operations. And I do believe suppliers have a responsibility, maybe not an obligation. I think it's Walmart's responsibility, but if they want to make sure their stuff is on the shelf, this is one way that they can do it. The last one I'll tell you, Jared, is using a tool called Volt is something that's very, very important. Volt is a tool that is offered by Walmart. It actually talks directly to the store system. So you're not looking at retail link data that's 24 hours plus old. You're looking at actual store information. And if every supplier should have at least one person who has access to Volt, because it will give you some very, very powerful information about how much is on hand, which is the center circle here. Of the 9 that are in the building, how many are on the sales floor? 1. How many will fit into, or how many are in the back room in a bin? 8. How many will fit on the shelf? And you can read the rest of it. We probably ought to actually offer some information about this tool with 8th and Walton, because this tool is extremely powerful to understand your business.
Well, for Walmart suppliers who have never heard about Volt, let's talk about that for a second. How does Volt help my understanding of not only in-store conditions and supply chain, but also my on-shelf availability?
Yeah, well, so certainly you see here on this, let's just take this one. This is a Tide Pod example in a specific store for a specific day. What it tells you is I have 1 for sale on the sales floor. I have 8 sitting in the back room. Now I'm backing up throughout the supply chain. I have 4 that are in transit from the distribution center. I have 0 that are allocated for that store, and I have 12 on order. I now know exactly the supply chain that looks like for that one item for that store. It also will tell you information about when's the last time you sold some, when's the last time you received some, when's the last time somebody changed an on-hand, was there a shelf capacity change, and anything like that for that particular item. And again, the beautiful part of it is we're talking about real-time data, not something that's 24 hours old and I'll have to do a query, etc. So again, we probably ought to give some additional perspective on this at a future date, but this to me is a really, really important tool. Let me show you with the last reason. You asked for the reasons why things aren't on the shelf. The third reason of the ones that I wanted to talk through is the supply chain. I'm going to walk you through this. I actually went to a store just yesterday in preparation for this, and I found this item. It happened to be a P&G secret item. See it right here. So there's one on the shelf. Now look at this. There's one on hand, so there's one in the store. There's one on the sales floor. Yeah, I see that. There's 0 in the back room, okay? There's 0 in transit to the store. There's 0 in the warehouse, and there's 0 on order. When somebody buys this last product, what do you think is going to happen?
Oh, there's going to be an out for several weeks.
100%. 100%. Something's broke here. There's absolutely no way when you have a case pack of 3, a shelf capacity of 6, that you have a 000 here unless there's a problem. So again, with Volt and with your preferred service provider teams, you can get on that, figure out what is the exact issue. Is it an issue that the supplier didn't ship it, or is it sitting in the warehouse and it hasn't allocated product to the store? Who knows what the problem is, but this one is going to be a problem. It's not a problem now, but it's going to be a problem the first time somebody buys this. You're going to have an on-shelf availability issue. So part of this is using this data to not only fix on-shelf availability problems, but using the data to prevent them from happening. And this one's preventable if somebody can act on it pretty quick.
All right, so a lot of great information about OSA. Mike, if I'm interested in getting more information about on-shelf availability, Volt, and how to work through these issues, where can I go for more information?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I don't know exactly the answer to give you. One of the things that we have been talking about as part of 8th and Walton is whether this is something that is of interest to the supplier for us to delve a little bit deeper into. We've done a lot of things on OTIF and a lot of things on compliance kind of things for the suppliers. I think that's been well received. I think it's been very, very helpful for the suppliers. Now we're starting to share some things that you could get involved with, but there's not going to be a Walmart banging on the table saying you got to get your on-shelf availability issue, because they know that they own a big part of that. But we are actually love to get some of your supplier feedback on on-shelf availability training possibilities. And what that looks like is a bunch of things and kind of hot topics. I won't hit all of this, but what is OSA? How do you alert for success, especially on items that are moving pretty well and pretty fast? Practical information like how do you read a shelf label? How do you know what aisle location is, etc. Obviously, providing a little bit of impact about what exactly Volt does and how does that help you through that process. What are some of the causes? We hit the very high kind of 50,000 foot level of what some of the causes of shelf availability are. But okay, great. Now that I know what those are, what do I do about them? And then what would you want to do to consider working with your company to be able to measure OSA and figure out how to develop alerts for it, and then actually drive it and measure not only on-shelf availability but recovered sales. We would love to put this particular material together for you and collaborate either as a training or as part of the step 1 process. But at this point in time, we'd love to get some feedback before we go build this out, if that's even of interest to the supplier community. So these are the areas that I think would be important, Jared, for us to be able to provide if there's interest from the supplier community.
And I want to remind everyone, if you are interested in getting more information about on-shelf availability, how you can help, if you would like to see us develop more programs about this, I've got a link in the description of this podcast. Please click it, go to our contact form, and let us know how we can help you with your on-shelf availability. Thank you for joining us today.